My name is Delaney Ashford, and last week, my sister Riley laughed at my side hustle right in front of everyone. Again. She made a joke at dinner about how I must be running some little hobby from my couch. Everyone chuckled. I didn't. She's always been like that. Riley works in corporate PR and acts like that makes her the queen of real jobs. Me? I left the traditional workforce years ago and built something on my own, something she never cared to understand. To her, I was the sister who didn't make it, the one playing around online with no clear title or office badge. I let her believe that, let the family believe that. I never corrected anyone. I figured results would speak for themselves eventually. And they did. Because just days after that dinner, at a corporate mixer Riley had dragged me to, more out of obligation than kindness, her own manager, the one she's been dying to impress for years, walked straight up to me and said, "Delaney Ashford, you're the founder of Ashfold Digital, right? I've been following your work. Are you still hiring?" Riley was standing 2 feet away, and for the first time in our lives, she had absolutely nothing to say. You'd think I'd be used to it by now. Riley has always been the shiny one. Sharp suit, sharper tongue. Her career has a LinkedIn page longer than some people's resumes. Regional PR lead by 28, featured in local press by 29, and the unofficial golden child since forever. And me? I burned out. I didn't crash, exactly. I just stopped showing up to an office that made me feel like I was wearing someone else's skin. I remember staring at the same campaign pitch for 2 weeks, trying to sell a soda brand that didn't even believe in its own tagline, and thinking, is this it? Is this who I'm giving my life to? So I quit. No big fanfare, no scandal. I walked out, ordered Thai takeout, and slept for 3 days straight. The funny thing is, the silence afterward didn't feel empty. It felt possible, liberating. I started freelancing, small stuff at first, rewriting bios, making Instagram audits, helping a friend of a friend figure out Shopify. I didn't have a name for it then, but I knew how to make a message stick. It turned out a lot of underdog businesses needed exactly that. Not flashy ads, just real clarity. I worked long hours in my sweatpants, ate too many peanut butter sandwiches, but every single client I helped felt like a breath of oxygen. Real people, not brand boards. Real problems, not corporate posturing. I fell back in love with the work. Not the titles or the prestige, just the work itself. 2 years later, I wasn't freelancing anymore. I was running something. Ashfold Digital wasn't huge, but it was stable. A tight network of remote creatives serving underrepresented entrepreneurs. I was proud of it. It paid my mortgage. It paid 3 other people's mortgages. It gave me my time back and gave others a start. But to Riley, it was still my little side hustle. She never asked what I actually did, never asked how many clients I had, or how long I'd been operating, or what revenue looked like. In her eyes, if it didn't come with a cubicle and a CEO above me, it wasn't real. It wasn't respectable. The last time we had dinner with our parents, she told the waiter I worked from my couch selling positivity. I smiled, tipped well, and changed the subject. I didn't flinch. I didn't explain. She wasn't worth the energy. Because here's the truth. I used to think I wanted her to take me seriously. I don't anymore. I just want her to stop speaking like she knows who I am. My mom, bless her, once said I was just between phases. She offered to talk to a friend who might have an opening at her husband's company. I told her I appreciated it. I didn't add that her friend's company had just applied for consulting through Ashfold. Small world. What none of them knew was that I'd spent the past year onboarding clients they couldn't name because they didn't move in those circles. Quiet brands. Ones that didn't scream for attention, but valued depth and strategy. I didn't need applause. I needed space. Which is why, when Riley called me that Monday and casually mentioned a mixer her firm was hosting, not a big thing, but it might be good for you to get out, I almost laughed. She made it sound like a favor, like I was some shut-in she was trying to rescue from irrelevance, but I asked her to send me the details anyway. And when I saw the guest list, I stopped mid-scroll. There were people on it I'd collaborated with anonymously, executives who'd quietly subscribed to my monthly brief. Agencies who'd reposted my frameworks without giving credit. There were names that had circled mine for months without connecting. So I said yes. I didn't tell Riley what I saw. I let her assume I was just tagging along, grateful for a chance to wear real clothes and sip on cheap wine. She had no idea I was walking into that room with more leverage than she'd ever had. The venue was one of those high-ceilinged places with exposed brick and fairy lights that looked like they belonged in an influencer's wedding post. Everyone was dressed in that effortless business casual style. Just enough blazer to say, I matter. Just enough denim to say, but I'm cool. Riley looked perfect, of course. Hair in a sleek low bun, heels that said promotion ready. She greeted people with her signature smile and a glass of rosé. When she introduced me, she didn't use my full name. Just my sister, Del. She does digital stuff. Digital stuff. I could have corrected her. I could have added founder and principal strategist at Ashfold Digital, or mentioned the podcast where I was just a guest speaker. I didn't. Let her frame me how she needed to. The truth didn't need me to say a word. I made small talk with a few people near the bar, nodded politely at the firm's junior account execs who clearly didn't know why I was there. And then I saw him, Walter Monroe. He wasn't flashy, he didn't command attention, but when he entered the room, Riley straightened up. I knew instinctively that this was her boss, the one whose approval she was desperate for, the one whose opinion carried weight behind every closed-door conversation. She hadn't even noticed him approaching us. He came over casually, holding a tumbler of something dark, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to me and said, Delaney Ashford? I blinked. Riley actually flinched. He extended his hand. I've read your framework on ethical scaling for boutique brands. Brilliant stuff. Didn't realize you were local. Riley's eyes bounced between us. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I am, I said, shaking his hand. Though my team's fully remote, mostly West Coast. Are you still expanding? He asked, leaning in slightly. We've been trying to implement something similar in-house, but your structure, frankly, it's more efficient than anything we've tested. I smiled. We are, quietly. It wasn't until later, when he'd moved on to speak to someone else, that Riley finally found her voice. You know Walter? No, I said. He knows me. She stared at me like I'd grown another head. There was a long pause. She finally managed a short, defensive laugh. Why didn't you ever tell me you were doing all that? I shrugged. You never asked. She looked down at her glass like she wanted to crawl inside it. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered every time she'd waved off my work like it was a hobby. Every time she'd rolled her eyes or smiled that condescending smile in front of our parents, our cousins, mutual friends. The way she'd treated me like a non-player in her world, someone safe to belittle. I wasn't angry. That's what caught me off guard the most. I was done being angry. I was something stronger, untouchable. We stayed at the event for another hour. I had 2 conversations that might lead to new partnerships. Riley mostly lingered near the edge of the room, unusually quiet. She left before me. As I walked out later, one of the junior staffers caught up with me. Excuse me, are you the Ashford from Ashfold Digital? The founder. I smiled. That's me. He held out his phone. Do you have a card? I'd love to show your work to my cousin. She's building something and could really use someone who gets it. I handed him a digital contact code. Tell her I said hi. As I stepped into the cool night air, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm, like some invisible thread had finally been cut. I didn't need Riley to clap for me. I didn't even need her to admit she'd been wrong. She just needed to stop laughing like I was the punchline. Riley didn't speak to me for 3 days after the mixer. That was fine. I wasn't expecting a thank you card or a formal apology. I didn't need a breakdown of how she felt watching her manager fanboy over her sister's company. But I could feel the shift, like something small had snapped inside her, and she didn't know how to put it back. She wasn't angry. She was disoriented. And that, in many ways, was worse for her. On the 4th day, I got a text. Can we talk? Just us. I waited an hour before replying. Sure. Coffee on 9th? 2 p.m. She showed up on time, barely, and looked less put together than usual. Her blazer wasn't perfectly pressed, and she wore flats instead of heels. For Riley, that was a red flag. She sat down, cleared her throat, and stared at her coffee like it might offer her a script. I didn't know, she finally said. I sipped my drink. Didn't know what? That you were doing all that. The business, the growth, the reach. I nodded slowly. You never asked. She flinched a little, as if she knew the line was coming and still couldn't dodge it. I didn't mean to make you feel small, she said after a pause. I met her eyes. No, you meant to make me feel smaller than you. She winced. That's not fair. Isn't it? I asked gently. Riley, for years, you turned every question about my work into a punchline. You talked over me, dismissed what I did, and you never once thought to ask if maybe, just maybe, I had something worth listening to. She fell silent. For a long moment, we just sat there, the hum of espresso machines filling the air between us. I think I was jealous, she whispered finally. You got out. That caught me off guard. Out of what? I asked. She looked tired. The game, the race. You left the structure, and somehow you still built something. I never stopped running, and I'm not even sure what I'm running toward anymore. That I didn't expect. I thought I was ahead, she continued. But that night, when Walter came up to you first, I realized I don't even know what ahead means anymore. I didn't say anything. I let her sit with that. I think I resented you, she admitted, because you didn't need people to see you to keep going. And she hesitated. I live for that. You've always been good at being seen, I said. Yeah, she replied, but I don't know if I've ever been understood. Something about that line lingered. I remembered all the dinners, the shallow compliments, the way our parents bragged about her LinkedIn updates, but never once asked what I did day to day. I remembered the way Riley's jokes always landed with laughter, never consequence. She was the golden one. I was the quiet sister, the creative, the drifter, the independent spirit. But none of those words ever sounded like respect. She looked up at me. I'm sorry, Del. This time it sounded real, not defensive, not performative, just tired and honest. I appreciate that, I said, then added, but I'm not looking for redemption. I'm not angry anymore. She looked surprised. You're not? I shook my head. No, I was, years ago. But I let it go when I realized your opinion didn't change my reality. I didn't build Ashfold to prove anything to you. I built it because I wanted something I believed in. And I do. She nodded slowly. You're happy? I'm steady, I said, which for me is better. She smiled faintly. Maybe I could learn from that. I leaned back. Maybe, but that's on you. We sat in silence for a moment, and for the first time in a long time, it wasn't awkward. It was level, equal, in a way we'd never been. Not because I had finally won something, but because I no longer needed to. Her validation didn't hold power over me anymore. And without that weight pressing on my shoulders, I could finally look her in the eye and just see my sister. Flawed, proud, uncertain, human. Before we left, she asked quietly, if someone at my firm reached out about consulting with you, would you take the call? I considered that for a long beat. Depends on the terms. She smiled. It was small, but real. I walked out of the cafe feeling a strange kind of lightness. Not triumph, not vindication, something gentler. Peace, maybe. Not because Riley had changed, or because she'd finally recognized me, but because I no longer needed her to. A week after our coffee, I received an email from Monroe. Subject line, let's talk potential collaboration. It was polite, professional, and unmistakably genuine. He outlined a few challenges their internal comms team had been struggling with and asked if I'd be open to a consultation call. We've been revisiting the Ashfold model, he wrote, and I think there's opportunity here for both sides. I sat with it for a few hours. Not because I was unsure about the work. I knew I could help, but because I needed to be clear on why I'd say yes. I wasn't in this to prove anything to Riley or to capitalize on an awkward family dynamic. That wasn't how I worked. So I wrote back with measured curiosity, and we scheduled a discovery call. The call went well. Monroe came prepared. His questions were sharp, his tone respectful. He didn't talk down to me, didn't circle around my resume, didn't make assumptions. After 40 minutes, he said, "Frankly, Delaney, I think your company is doing what we've been trying to do for a year, with a fraction of our overhead. I'm impressed." I smiled. "We try to keep things human." He nodded. "We could use more of that." We discussed scope, then budget. I named my price, one I would have hesitated to say out loud 5 years ago. He didn't blink. By the end of the week, we had a signed contract. I didn't tell Riley right away. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because, for once, it wasn't about her. It wasn't about what she'd think or say or feel. This wasn't a statement. It was just work, good work, earned work. When she eventually found out, I could tell from her message that she didn't know how to respond. So, I saw the email chain. "You're officially consulting for us?" "Yes," I replied. "Starting next quarter." Monroe and I had a great conversation. There was a pause before she wrote again. "Proud of you, really." It was the first time she'd said anything like that. I read it twice, then locked my phone and let it sit there. A year ago, that message would have meant the world. Now, it was nice, but not necessary. I no longer needed her to rewrite our past. I'd already written my future without her permission. And the funny thing was, my world didn't shift when she acknowledged me. It stayed solid, because it had never depended on her. That weekend, I took my team out for dinner. It was just 6 of us, but we filled the corner booth with stories and laughter, and that rare kind of energy that only happens when people genuinely like building things together. We weren't a Fortune 500 company, but we were stable, sustainable, and real. After the bill was paid, one of my designers, Nora, raised her glass and said, "To Delaney, for building the kind of company we actually want to stay in." Everyone clinked. I didn't make a speech. I just smiled and thanked them. Because I knew what I had built, and I knew who I was in it. There was no more shrinking, no more needing to be understood to be valid. I had stopped asking for permission the day I left that agency job years ago, and now I was living the answer to a question I never needed them to ask. People often assume success has to be loud, that it needs a stage, a spotlight, a mic drop moment, something big enough to shut the doubters up. But I've learned something different. Real success, the kind that doesn't fade, is quiet. It walks in without needing to announce itself. It doesn't beg to be seen. It simply exists, grounded and whole. I didn't build Ashfold Digital to change anyone's mind. I built it because I believed in what I could offer. Because I was tired of shrinking to make others comfortable. I didn't want applause. I wanted freedom. Riley and I still talk. There's less tension now, more pauses, more listening. She doesn't joke about my work anymore. She asks questions, and I answer. Not to prove anything, but because the space between us finally feels real. That, to me, is enough. I used to think I needed some grand moment, a confession, an apology, a shift in family dynamics. But I didn't. What I needed was to stop waiting for her to see me. Because I see myself now. I walk into rooms without explanation. I take meetings without permission. I say my rates out loud and never flinch. And when someone asks if I'm still hiring, I know it's not out of surprise. It's out of respect. Let them laugh in the beginning. Let them question you when your path looks unfamiliar. Eventually, they'll stop underestimating you. And by the time they do, you'll already be too far ahead to care.